Hello everyone, welcome back to lesson 2 of sight size drawing or sight size measuring. In the first lesson I discussed how to create the shape and the accurate proportion of the ball using your pencil as a measuring tool. So just checking width to height ratios, finding vertical and horizontal lines to fit that object into. In this case I used a square because the width to height ratio is the same for a circle. And something else I just want to mention really quickly. When we're using this method, it is very important to always keep the pencil at a straight line, a straight parallel line to the subject that you're drawing, whether it's vertical or horizontal. You don't want to tilt the pen or pencil and get foreshortening. You almost want to think of there being a piece of glass in front of what you're drawing that is going to be level with your drawing pad. So anytime I'm carrying a line across, I'm staying perfectly parallel to my paper as I move it out into space, as though this plane of my pad were to continue right across in front of my subject matter. Now today what I want to discuss is ways to check shadows. The shapes and the placement of the shadows is very important in revealing the form of the ball. So what I've done here is I've rigged up a little device that I find to be very helpful. I've just taken 2 graphite sticks and I taped them together. So one is vertical and one is horizontal. Now I do this because when I'm trying to gauge the spacing, let's say I'm working from the edge of the ball and I want to figure out where my shadow starts. Actually create a right angle. I can let my horizontal line come right to the top of that ball, and I can let my vertical line come to the left side. And then I can see exactly how far in that shadow is. Where does that shadow start? Okay. I use my other pencil. And I'm going to say it is right about here. Right to the edge of my tape, actually. Okay. So I bring that over. I align that with my drawing. Might have to straighten that line out a little. So these graphite sticks have a little bit of give. I can change the angle slightly. Okay. And then I can mark it on my paper. Right about there is where that top shadow starts. Okay, now something else I can check just to make sure that I'm on the right track is the space from the edge of the ball. Okay, so from this edge to where that shadow begins. So you see, it's almost like you have a little grid on your paper. So bear with me here, it just takes a minute to sometimes get my thumb in the right place. Okay, but I can check that space and make sure that that works here. Now the thumb looks really big on the camera, so it's kind of hard to see, but I'll just kind of straighten these out. So right where my thumb is, that's where that shadow begins. And I want to see if that space is going to match up on my drawing, and it pretty much does. Okay, so now my bottom part of my shadow is not as distinctive. So it starts out dark right here and it just kind of transitions into a lighter value tone. You kind of lose that line where the light and the shadow begin. So you know, I don't really think there's a distinctive point to check there, but what I could do is check you know, where that shadow starts to fade, sometimes you just have to start putting in a few lines to help guide you. So with this type of measuring, you can do it before you put any information on the paper and just find your points, or you can do it once you've started the drawing to just double check things, make sure that everything is going the way you want. Okay, so I'm going to say this shadow right now comes pretty close to the midpoint, right? And I can just use my thumb and the pencil. I don't need a right angle here. I'm just going to check the space from the middle of this ball to where I have that shadow and make sure that that matches up pretty close. Okay, so the rest of this shadow comes down here somewhere. I'm not going to worry as much about that because it's not a very distinctive shape. The next thing, though, that I really want to pay very close attention to is my cast shadow. Okay, so this is a very important shape. It helps me to understand the plane that the object's sitting on, and it helps me to understand the direction that the light is hitting the object. Okay, so the first thing that I need to do is figure out exactly where that cast shadow starts underneath the object. All right, so I'm going to go back to my little device here. Okay, and actually I'm going to create a right angle in the bottom half of this. Okay. Start with the object. So I have my right angle, so the vertical line is touching the right side of the ball, and the horizontal line is under the ball. And right about there is where my shadow starts beneath the ball. So again, I've just taken that and bringing it right over, making sure that that vertical line is once again touching the edge of my ball. And put my little mark right there. Okay, so now there's two other points that are going to be very helpful for working out the shape of this shadow. One is the space. If I find the lowest part of that shadow, where that shadow dips down, the space from the bottom of the ball to that point, that's going to be pretty important. And then the other point that's going to be very important is out here where that shadow ends. So the first thing I want to do, since I already have a fixed point for where the shadow starts, right there, is I just want to measure from that point to about where the edge of that shadow, or where that shadow ends on the tabletop. So I'm going to say it's about that much space. Oh. Shift this over because I'm off a little bit. Okay, so right here, somewhere right about here. Now what I'm going to do is just put a vertical line. Just going to tell me that that's where that shadow ends. And I might as well throw a horizontal line in as well. It's going to be rather important. So having the vertical and the horizontal lines in there is going to be very easy for gauging how far down this dips, right? If I have a horizontal line touching the bottom of the ball, I can see exactly how much space the shadow dips below that line. One thing I want to mention is that I am measuring to the dark part of the shadow. That is a very distinctive shape. This outer halo, I'm getting a double shadow, so this lighter variation I'm not as concerned about. I'm really just looking for the distinctive dark shape of the inner shadow. Okay, so now the other point that I want to measure is the back of the shadow. Okay, so where that shadow falls behind the ball, and I can use my pencil line and just hold it straight across. So there's a couple of ways that I'm going to check this. This is the first way. Okay, so I'm going to just say it starts about there. Okay, I'm also going to check using my device. Okay, so what I can do is line the horizontal on the bottom of my ball. Bear with me here. Trying to not get my fingers in the way. Okay, and then I'm going to just mark with my other finger where I've put that point and make sure that that's the same here. Pretty close. Okay, so now just a few more points. The next thing I want to look at is where this point is, where this tip of the shadow is. So again, I'm going to use a line coming off the bottom of my ball. You can see it's above that line. Okay, how much above is it? How much below that line is it? So we could estimate that, or we could be more exact. And I always like to be as exact as I can. Okay, so what I'm going to do is take this device, create once again a horizontal line along the bottom of the ball, and the vertical line is lined up with the edge of that shadow, and I'm just slid my thumb down to approximately where that point is. Let's take that information right over here, line it up, and then mark where my thumb is. Okay, so there's just one other point that I want to check, and that is, where the low point of the shadow is. So just as I had done before, to check where the outer edge of that shadow ends, I'm going to do the same thing to check the lower part of that shadow. So again, I create a straight line across the bottom of the ball, and then I can use my thumb. Actually, I'm just going to bring this over. So I'm going to try to find the lowest point here, which is right about here. Okay, I'm going to bring that right over, line that up. Okay, make sure I'm touching my thumb to the paper. Such a subtle dip. Really just where the bottom of my thumb is, right about there. And that gives me my shadow shape. Okay. So I'll extend that line over a little bit. Now I can start drawing this in.